Good evening, everyone. We want to get right into tonight's seminar and networking session because this brave soul beneath me, Matthias Meyer Lutterloh, had the unbelievable audacity to comment on the value of an NFT as it's looked at in the securities, derivatives, and the vault environments. And he created such an unbelievable firestorm on LinkedIn this week that I didn't think the comments would ever end. I thought we were going to be on there forever on the same thread, but it was fascinating and engaging. And would you do us the honor of telling us a little bit about you and a little bit about your background before we dive right in? Because I know Richard and I are ready to roll. We're ready to go. Yes.
Yeah, hi, hello everybody. I come from a little bit of colorful background. So I'm by heart a designer. I studied fashion design in Italy quite some years ago. It was, let's say, for me not sufficient only to design. So I went throughout the whole, let's say, value chain and built businesses around, like doing private label, import, export, consulting, and I reached have an own design studio in China, in Germany, established some companies in Europe, and I reached at the end with having 15 retail stores and an own brand in China. But I was always fascinated by beautiful things, let's say, which is also food and health and traveling. So I did that a lot, and created also restaurants and bars. I was on in Mykonos, in Berlin. I'm an author also. I've published a book, quite a big one, 670 pages, and yeah, that was tough.
That took a while.
But that was in a sabbatical year when my son was born. So before he was born, I published it on the day he was born.
Oh wow!
I made it for him, let's say, and because of that, I said that I also decided at that time to sell my business and stay at home, and looking for a remote business that I don't have to travel and have employees and all the thing that comes along. And I went into technology. First, music, copyright protection and distribution of for musicians. Of their files, of in the virtual market space, and then of course blockchain, and now I'm in love with NFTs. And there are also two spectrums. The one is the art factor, the other one is the finance factor. And because of the blockchain, I created several things like a gold-backed stablecoin, and there we have, for example, very much the need, the regulations with vaults, with the combination of physical and the digital assets. And that's why I think I could go into that thread and say, hey, this is a little bit a weak opinion. What I mentioned, there are a lot of difficulties with that, and that's me in a nutshell.
So tell us a little bit about your joining us tonight from Cyprus, and tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about your work with the European Blockchain Association for those who may not be familiar with that organization.
Yeah, the European Blockchain Association is a organization. It's a semi-DAO, meaning that some parts are managed by we could say a constitution, but it's, let's say, rules and guidance. So we have a board, and we have the sub-chapters, which one is the NFT working group, which I'm leading and I'm building up now. And one is like research, education, of course, bringing smart people together and not only discuss, but also create researches and papers. And through the board, We are well connected with the European Parliament, European Commission, with, let's say, the lawmakers, and we know what's going on. There are some round tables. I was lucky to be invited to one and be face to face with people that are maybe making law, and we can give suggestions, and create a paper and give it to them, and they might include it in their thoughts for the next regulations. And that's a very interesting, let's say, organization for that. So it has some importance in Europe to be connected with also lawmakers and creative and let's say minds that try to shape this new environment.
So let's go back just a few days, 3 or 4 days ago, and Samson Williams uh, came forward with a post in which he was asking a little bit about, uh, he was commenting actually on a video that had to do with sneakers and whether or not sneakers are a non fungible token, a fungible token, whether they're an entity, whether they're an investable item, and how the sale of sneakers should be handled in the metaverse. And tell me a little bit, if you could, about what attracted you to his original post in that original video before this firestorm broke out about value and derivatives and securities.
Well, it was less his post, but the video, and it's something that I experienced, unfortunately, a lot in this world. Is that we have, I mean, especially in the now in the blockchain, or mainly in the metaverse, we have people jumping in and say like, "Oh, that's great," and they have zero knowledge about the corporate law. They have very little knowledge about business. And I'm not saying now that these are the artists that don't have this knowledge. It's actually the opposite. It's some business people or startups that say, okay, wow, that's it. And they analyze business ideas or come up with information or their opinions, and they are absolutely one layer deep. I mean, there's nothing behind and no knowledge, and that was what triggered it. Where I said like, even I started a bit as a fun. I said like, oh yeah, this is very genius, but actually, as you know, in an ironic way, that this doesn't work as it is, and the terminology that is used is wrong. That there's no knowledge about the physical world that is combined in this specific subject. And yeah, that's why I wanted to comment. I didn't know that it was going to be a long discussion.
And isn't this really some of the complexity? Because as we get into where the devil meets the detail, and we start to look at the language that people are using around NFT and metaverse, it starts to uncover these areas that are very sort of murky and where definitions really haven't yet been established. And what actually happened is, from this video, you first started this firestorm and this avalanche by suggesting that this idea about sneaker marketing could be contextualized within this vault idea. And can you share with those of us who maybe didn't see the original video or aren't familiar with the conversation what it was that you meant when you put forth the vault idea?
The wall, there are two. We have two walls. The thing that I was jumping on was that the guy in the video presented these ideas as genius, and he said, "Oh my God, it's great! There is a vault, which is nothing but a warehouse, but they call it vault, and the sneakers are there." And the idea of people buying NFTs, and they can trade it in the secondary market, and they don't even have to get the sneakers physically in their hand, which is true. It's a concept, especially for example with art, with gold, with valuables. You can have that, but the whole point behind the logistic part, the auditing part, the accounting part, is a very, very mature business and has very mature and very clear regulations that are not in place and definitely not have been described in this video. And vaults are important, of course. For sneakers, I wouldn't call it a vault, I would call it a warehouse. But then you have to understand, like, who is managing this? Because let's say there are scams that people say, okay, I calculate with the fact that maybe only 10 or 15% or 20% of the people will redeem their physical goods. So they're selling, let's say, an under collateralized amount of NFT. So they have 10 sneakers in the vault, in the warehouse. They sell 1,000 NFTs and they hope only the 10 will be redeemed. And that is one, for example, one problem. So who's auditing this? Who is doing that? So let's go, for example, for art. If I have a piece of art and I want to trade it, and people don't want to move that from one physical place to the other. Yeah, we need walls, we need logistic, we need maybe somebody who has it, but we need also somebody who can control. There's this NFT and there's the equivalent physical item that I want, and there must be an auditor that controls it. The next thing is, how do I redeem that? Will they accept this token? In the moment, there's a little chance that a warehouse or a vault will accept a token, say like this is the proof of ownership. That only works between vaults, digital vaults, and digital wallets. And this is the whole ecosystem that we have here. The moment we come to a real underlying physical assets and NFTs, there's a lot to do because it's two worlds that are yet not really connected, and there's some gap that we have. And that was my intention actually to point it out.
I
So
think
your
another thing
approach,
that, sorry. I think another thing that comes through on this one is if we're talking about vaults and asset holding of asset, all of a sudden I'm thinking banking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what banks were originally created for, was to hold other people's assets. So now we're getting to a point that how is someone securing the asset that they've got? It's on a hard drive in a in a safe. So with this kind of unknown regulation on what are these actual assets, is the other thing is how are they kept secure and how is the actual finance that's come out of the trade of these kept in secure ways?
Mm. Okay, it doesn't have to be necessarily banks. For example, gold is out of the banking system. So I know very deep the concept that could be done, for example, with gold with the Royal Mint in the UK. So that is a very nice example of physical, I mean, of digitalization, although this is if it's LBMA gold, that is a standard, it is a fungible token. If it would be a gold bar with a number or a nugget, then it would be a fungible token. But there's clear that somewhere the gold is stored for good reasons. And you trade it on the digital marketplace, which is great. It really, really gives you a lot of opportunities, good or bad. But uh, so it doesn't have to be necessarily a bank, but you're right. I mean, it immediately clicks and says like, oh, I go to the bank, I have my vault in Switzerland, maybe the most preferred.
You don't have a key anymore. You don't walk in and then the key and into a safety deposit box. It's now a digital number. But surely there's something we can do with the virtual reality that you can still walk down the stairs and lock your information away.
The point is here we're not only in the virtual reality. Here it was clear that you don't buy a digital, and we have this idea now of the twinning, right? That especially in fashion, that if you buy a physical good, you have already a digital twin, and then you have that to show off, or you can walk around in the metaverse. How much sense it is makes, I don't know. I come from fashion, and one of the big issues is, of course, and environmental issues. and carbon footprint, and if we increase that by also having a digital twin of that, I don't know how we're gonna deal that. Okay, but there's let's put it only on the digital part. Then a vault is even more critical, because I give somebody the access to my goods, yeah, that I have. If this is money, or digital currencies, or if these are my NFTs, right? Fine. Then if I'm losing my private key the whole time, then it's maybe a good idea to have it as a custodian. But if not, what happens if this entity is not regulated? Yes, we have regulations for the wallet, but it maybe is an entity in the Seychelles, right? Or I checked it a lot with, we have such a patchwork of jurisdictions with different regulations. So this is exactly what we discussed a little bit our discussion here. Where do we have an overall regulation that actually covers everything? Because there's so many loopholes. I can today still open and holding in the BVI, put my operational company in the Seychelles, and then say I have a letterbox office in something that sounds nice, and all of a sudden have a good image, and
legal entity.
Legal entity,
yeah.
So we go from this discussion about what you really approached. It started out as a sneaker discussion, and then you approached it from a fashion logistician point of view, let's say, saying, okay, it's all good in theory, but let's bring the rubber where it meets the road, and how are you actually going to accomplish these goals? What I was so surprised at in this exchange that happened on LinkedIn this week was, out of the blue, they came out of the woodwork. And the next thing you know, they're throwing at you the Howey test. And can you share with us where you think that came from? How did we get from, here's the piece I want to know, how did we get from discussing digitized sneakers to the Howey test?
Yeah, there was. I think we have this discussion anyway. I mean, we are looking into the big question: what are securities, and the Howey test defines securities. And I think one person said, like, okay, I believe these are securities, because it's the Howey test works well here. I don't even think that they ever knew what is the Howey test, or checked what are the conditions for the Howey test to define, is this a security or not. But we have this question since a long time, and the main point now is about, it came with tokenization, with gold, with stable coins, most important that they look into this. And then somebody unexperienced said, like, oh, I think it's securities. And that was the point. I think it's exactly this not knowing really what they talk about in many cases, just spitting out things that they heard somewhere, don't get deeper into the whole meaning. And that is what I said before. People don't even understand business or the terminology. For example, in the European Business Blockchain Association, we try to now define the terminology for NFTs as a research paper. And as a matter of fact, we don't even have that for cryptocurrencies. We have made a research about the terminology of crypto and how it changed over the years, from cryptocurrency, crypto asset, virtual asset, virtual blah 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 assets. I can share that once with you if you're interested. It's incredible. And now we have it with NFTs, but with all the other touch things that come with it. What are the real things for the regulation? What do they mean? What is a security? What is not a security? What it means if it's a security? What does it mean, a custodian or non-custodian? Because do you have to do KYC or not? Do you have to my AML regulations follow them or not? All these things are questions that are coming actually from the legal perspective. The next thing are the one of the if it's workable in real life, what if it's mirrored, if it's a dual life or dual world concept, and there are so many gaps, and that's why I'm actually in the European Blockchain Association to help defining this, because we will run into a lot of things. That we have an amazing opportunity now, especially with NFTs. I'm really in love with NFTs, but this kind of very shallow approach is destroying what is possible for the first wave. We will have our winter with that. We will have a crash of value, for my opinion, and we will have to wash out a lot of projects, unfortunately. Um, and people have to look at, the whole holistic view and how this can be solved and how we can make good and sustainable and project with values, because we have something amazing in hand, which is a new revolution. It's really a revolution that with NFTs we have a new shift of power. Now, the industrial revolution, we didn't have it with the blockchain yet. NFT is the one that actually makes it able to put it to each and every single human in the world, citizen in the world, that they have power with the NFT and ownership. But if we destroy that now, it will take us years to build the possibilities that we have here in hand. And we will have the watchdogs going in and maybe putting more regulations and like already cutting wings before the bird can fly. Let's put it this way.
I have a question for you on this kind of, as this thing globalizes. What is your thoughts on privacy of wallets and completely anonymous wallets? Do you see that being something that the regulators start to iron in on, of who owns wallets, and this transparency of complete anonymity that is around in current wallets, bringing that into a line to help with regulation?
Okay, first they do already focus on that. I mean, you see that they want to narrow down the possibilities of decentralized exchanges and non-custodian wallets. You will have now in South Korea, just said 2 days ago or yesterday, a chat. They implemented yesterday, I think, the travel rule, so you cannot anymore transfer crypto from an exchange to an anonymous wallet. Look, for me, it is two things. The general idea of blockchain is not to have that control, right? The problem is humanity.
That always seems to come up.
That is the problem, because we have this concurrent, not to interrupt your train of thought, but we have this concurrent argument in the States. I see it more than I do overseas, about a base misunderstanding of what is an NFT. Is an NFT art? No. An NFT is not art, in my point of view, and I'll go to my grave saying that. An NFT is a digital address on the blockchain, nothing more, nothing less, depending on the contract, how you sell it, where you sell it, what token it's on, all of that taken into consideration. But an NFT itself, a non fungible token, is a digitized address on the blockchain, period. We have people that are arguing that NFT is art, and what is the meaning of art? And the base concept has become so convoluted. In addition to that, this week we have pending legislation from the Biden administration on regulation of cryptocurrency in an environment where we've had a downfall of the stock market this week and a tremendous downslide in crypto itself. And now all of a sudden you're going to, patch on pending legislation that nobody really understands what it is or what it means. And then the third leg of that ugly stool is, here you have coming out of the woodwork, like in this dialogue that we're referencing which I'm so happy that you were able to join us, you've got people citing the SEC and the Howey test and this regulation within what was supposed to have been decentralized advancement, decentralized finance. So there is a broad base of miscommunication around terms and around what happens in a volatile market when we can't accurately predict what the next move actually is.
Yeah, well, this is something we can anyway not predict. Coming maybe back to Richard's question,
Yes, point.
I'm, you know, I like the idea of having wallets that are not identified, let's say anonymous, but I don't like the idea that comes with it. So I think that I think we can live and harvest the blockchain and NFTs equally with identifying who we are with our wallets and not saying, okay, everything has to be anonymous. I'm okay with the idea that a wallet is not linked or published with a name that is published, that this is not clear, but that there must be a registry, what we have in many things like, the exchanges that have, if they go with KYC, they know who you are. But also for security reasons, I feel like, people, they're showing this, all their NFTs and maybe their name. And I can, as a matter of fact, an art, why they say art should be this, as the buying can be anonymous, is people want that the buyer is not exposed.
Correct.
For security reasons and also for reasons of, let's say, image, that the humiliation if somebody says I sell this piece of art, and people will say, oh, he doesn't have money anymore, he has to sell his assets. It's an image thing also. Museums are only allowed to sell a piece of art to buy a better piece of art, a more expensive one, and not to sell it to cover their costs because they don't make money or they have issues with money. So this is a totally different aspect, but this aspect is valid. If I know that the person A has all this cyberpunks, CryptoPunks, whatever the punks they have, and they consider him a billionaire now, and maybe then they kidnap the kid. Or when he's selling it, he's getting a lot of comments that, oh my God, this guy is now whatever, and there's so many speculations, or he's bankrupt, and this we could avoid as an example why it shouldn't be published, maybe the name. But in terms of, if you say that, for example, there's a wash trade going on, and all of a sudden one exchange or one competitor of OpenSeas has higher amounts of turnover, but with very little amount of wallets, then okay, we will say there's something going on that is a bit weird. And this needs to be identified.
This is what's so crazy about the American culture to a degree, because in an atmosphere where you were supposed to be able to have this anonymity and this backdoor shuffling of assets and funds and properties, what we have is the inverse. We have celebrities vying to buy Bored Ape yachts, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, and when they do purchase, they come out with PR press releases, and the next thing you know, Snoop Dogg or Eminem or Paris Hilton or whoever it may be that bought the latest and the greatest is suddenly escalated and elevated in the public's eye. But here's my question to you both. If I purchase an NFT, if I sell it on the secondary market, if I hold it, have I traded an asset?
Definition: what is an asset? Yes, if I have for me, an asset can be a painting, can be digital art, and if I sell it, I traded it. But it's not that it's a financial instrument. It's a definition of what is an asset. Everything is an asset class, but it doesn't have to be an asset class in the financial, let's say, definition and regulations. For my opinion, anyway, if I buy art, an NFT, most of it that we will see will be anyway private things. This is a nice way. I mean, like, I'm creating something. If I can prove that this is not my continuous business, is the next thing for the tax. How do I identify that this person just made it as a hobby, or this person makes it on a regular basis as a business? Because then you have different kind of tax rules. And but I see that if I create art and I'm an artist, I'm selling. Okay, it's my business. Fine, I will have to pay my tax, but it's not a financial instrument. I don't know how the people can compare this. That something that has never been regulated, never been classified as a financial instrument, all of a sudden is a financial instrument. If my son sells his Pokemon cards, is he a professional investor? No. And this is the weird thing. I don't understand.
Well,
And likewise, Richard, if I could ask you, is if I have conducted a wash trade, let's say, have I engaged in money laundering? Because this was another criticism that came out on this discourse. There was the label thrown around of all you're doing is a glorified, sophisticated, cosmopolitan form of money laundering if you're not going to consider NFTs a tradable asset. Do you agree with that sentiment or no?
I think there's a couple of layers to it first. So first to go back one and go, look, I think there's also, when we consider what's being produced and who's producing it, we also have to think that there's probably at least 3 layers of different type of people buying it. There's definitely going to be image people who are doing it, like you said, for, here, I'm Eminem, I've just spent $500,000, let's get some PR and let's put my name out there. So there's a PR kind of side to it. There's also an investor who's seen the opportunity, who's done the research, who's looked where they need to do, and is actually approaching this with the same kind of scrutiny they would an investment in a stock. And then there's the speculators. And the speculators are the biggest group of all of them. And I think that that is where all of this ends up being a problem, because there's absolutely no prediction on what the speculators are going to do. And I think that when we were talking before of what happens when we have the first big kind of winter or the first big crash of this, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up losing speculators. So that's my kind of hope, is after that kind of big bubble goes, all of these ones that seem to be hanging around with nothing underlying them, no depth, no real world connection, no real value that they add, that they just appear like a money grab. I think that that's when we start to see the disappearing of that, and then we start to see the growth of the true value infrastructure that starts to be set up. Okay, so that's the one side.
Susan's commenting that it's about control, and in some ways a farce of the status quo, scared of innovators. Not quite sure what she means with that. It is about control, and in some ways a farce of the status quo, scared of innovators. Not quite clear, Susan, if you want to clarify what you mean there. But so tell me this. So, well, do you think that a test is necessary for NFTs? Do we need to put NFTs through a cycle of tests to actually define and delineate it's an
Definitely. I think because NFTs can also represent assets that they should be regulated. Another thing that you just point out was wash trade. That's something illegal. So it's not so much the money laundry, maybe, but pushing up the price for resale. But of course, there's a lot of possibilities with money laundry because there is no KYC, and somebody can easily create it. So yeah, there we have to look into that. But actually, this is more like the criminal part of it. I don't necessarily mean that this needs to be regulated because of that, because people are abusing NFTs for criminal activities or illegal activities. So that doesn't mean that it's immediately classified to be controlled from the SEC or CISIC in Cyprus or other regulators. That is more something for the watchdogs, that they say, okay, there's something for the tax and other financial, the FATA, for example, FATA, the financial
Shauna,
action was.
I
So
actually have a question for Shauna here.
Yeah.
Shauna, we were talking the other day about a critic, or we were talking about this idea of a third
Evaluation.
party person or
Yes.
entity that's able to give a valuation that we can get some form of consistency in the NFT market
Yes.
towards a measuring stick. So maybe the regulation that we need to start looking towards is some form of self-regulation rather than waiting for governments to do it, and try and find some kind of valuation measure that we can kind of agree on. Maybe it's a DAO, maybe it's something down this kind of line, that we can agree on a value reference for NFTs, and some kind of way around that to regulate and kind of get rid of the bad players in it. What do you think, Matthias and Shauna?
Well, I'll go jump in first. Bruce Bates, who was also in this discussion, and as these ideas were being lobbied about, said, "Hey, wait a second. In the art sector, in the days of old, art was sold and purchased, and was that considered an investment?" And so he's saying that he's talking about the hundreds of years prior to NFTs ever even being established. If things weren't a security then, what suddenly makes them a security now? And Susan adds, just before you comment, Matthias, she says they're worried about art and creators bypassing the confined labels of creators and art when it comes to the financial sector being classified as an asset. And then she adds some more information about her background. So when Bruce was commenting, Matthias, about this history, this art history, and selling valuables, selling luxury items, selling automobiles, things of high value that weren't considered financial instruments, how do we reconcile that with the current market and the contemporary environment that we're in now?
I think Bruce is correct. That's why should it be changing? I mean, it is. I explained it before. Why they also don't want to have the art sector, or there are arguments not to, let's say, monitor the art sector so much. And it's a known fact that art and selling art is one of the, the playgrounds for money laundering. Knowing that still it is this since centuries. I think that the problem that we see here anyway is exactly this, and maybe that also touches the question that Susan gave. We have really some rules and regulations that have been there in place and developed over centuries, maybe millenniums. And some are good, some are bad, maybe some are over-regulated, maybe some are not enough regulated. But there is something, this is an experience. And now we come into this vacuum, into this metaverse, into this new thing. And all of a sudden, everybody pops up and has a concept for that, and ignoring actually maybe the good things that we already have and that has been established. And we went through in Athens democracy when it was established like 350 years before Jesus. I mean, why should we ignore these things and examples of failure that we can see in history? So I think that people reject too much or are not experienced enough or don't have enough knowledge about the past and say, now we have to do something new, and they start from zero and running into all these little and big problems that humanity ran into in the last, let's say, couple of thousands of years when we were organizing more societies and rules. And becomes the question, yes, if there's another, maybe other institutions like a DAO that could take over, but I'm pretty sure this is very difficult if this DAO is was supposed to decide whether in this or in another thread. We should talk a bit maybe with people, not with the politicians, but maybe with smart people that studied political science and political theories, and or have knowledge as historians and can say, guys, this could be a nice constitution. This could manage this vacuum. Here we have examples how it worked, how it didn't work, and this could be a new, let's say, set of rules and values. And this is the point, for my opinion. I think we should combine the past. We should try to. We have a chance to correct mistakes and take out overregulation, but not starting from zero, and especially not proposing this from people that, in my opinion, have zero knowledge about that. And here is the whole, let's say, issue that we face. It's like if you ask, I met this in fashion, and I'm a fashion designer, and I would go and ask 100 people what is their ideal jacket. Would be something nobody can wear. I can guarantee. I get 100 different opinions. That's why we take, unfortunately, or good or bad, we take people more experienced that study this or that do that, and they failed and made their errors and learned about it and do that for a good purpose and say, okay, I can do this task because I do it since ever. And this is missing a little bit, in my opinion.
I agree. We were talking before we went live tonight about the various differences depending on where one lives and their point of view and their cultural reference. And we spoke a little bit about, the American perspective of the US dollar and its relative strength versus the European perspective on blockchain and its equitable opportunity for distribution versus an Asian perspective coming out of China, which is we're going to build it and to hell with everybody and full steam ahead. Um, to what extent do you both think, I'll add, that a lack of any kind of global body, whether that was a metaverse body or a political body or based on the countries where we live, but any kind of consensus organization that can aptly represent the varying perspectives. To what degree is the absence of that affecting the discourse that we have right now?
Let me start in here. I think the first part that we can go there is one of the problems that we've been speaking about quite regularly, Shauna, is the fact that not everyone has access to the conversation. So if we're saying the metaverse is inclusive and so on, it's not inclusive because if you don't have electricity, you ain't part of the conversation. So our first level of problems to take with this governing body that we kind of imagining up is the fact that the only people who have access to it are the privileged who have electricity, and not even just the privilege to have electricity, the privilege to have the knowledge enough to get this far into a complicated community is not small. So not only is there a technological barrier to entry to be part of the discussion, there's also a knowledge barrier that needs to be broached to be part of the discussion. So then how do you regulate who is allowed to be part of that? So I think it ends up, as Matthias said, having more problems than than going, okay, let's just create a DAO. And you're like, what language are we going to speak?
Mm.
I mean, simple things like that start coming up. A language.
Yeah, I agree with you. But at the end, we have the situation all the time. I mean, if you want to try to help people with online access, let's say as a non-profit organization, you
I
want
have
to.
a connection there, Gus.
Hello?
Go ahead, Matthias.
yeah.
Go ahead, Matthias.
Yeah. Um, Richard, you said you live in South Africa, so let's say an African country, you want to help them. My life partner, she's into this field, and she was talking with NGOs, and they always say like, okay, what can we do and who can we reach? And most of the people can be reached, as you say already. I mean, this is the biggest problem. How can we, if we want to make, let's say, everybody vote, how can this be implemented? The other problem is the knowledge. That's correct. But at the end, we have to start with something right. We have to start with the people that are connected. The selection of the people maybe is more difficult, because if you would give now everybody a voting right, which actually is the right approach, how can we make sure that this is not a bot? How we can make sure it doesn't run into an extreme direction, whatever. So these are the things. How do you set the values? And I believe the most important point, and that's not only my opinion, there has been opinions from Greek philosophers many years ago. They had made a very funny idea, said, or quote is, if you really want to have a good society, take all the parents away, keep only the kids and educate them. And I fully agree with that. So our problem is education. We have to point on the next generation. And the nice thing is that I learn from my son every day. The things that they are thinking about, the environmental issues, the values that they have. At least he's in an international school, and there's like 100 different kind of cultures from 100 different countries. So for him, diversity, this thing is completely. They're 9 years old. They're talking completely open about gays, lesbian. For them, colors doesn't exist. Religions doesn't exist. There's no difference. They identify it, but they don't have a difference. So this is a nice thing that we will see. But we also have to see something else. At the moment, the metaverse is a little bit like the Roman Empire on his peak. You know, this is partly decadence by excellence. It has no values at all. The possibilities with the metaverse and the possibilities with the NFTs are there, but what we see in the moment, this is maybe also the why so many people are whether attracted or actually disgusted from it, is that they are in a decadent thing. If I hear that somebody buying something called Rolex Daytona, written with an I instead of a Y, and cost more than the original, and they're wearing that for what? To boost their ego. And this money goes where in the metaverse? For a watch, and not into something sustainable. If that would be a rule that everybody who buys such a watch, I think we talked about it before, Shona.
Yes, have an automatic kickback.
Would have to pay the same. If you buy luxury, pay the same amount for food for children. Nice.
Yeah.
Spend more, buy 10. I don't mind. But if you only do that, then it's something weird, and I think it's wrong. And this is where we are in the moment leading. How do we promote the values, and what is seen here and promoted, and why maybe also so many people are attracted, and why we have so many questions about it.
You know, you may have touched there on something really critical, which is that it has the potential of being the downfall of our ability to advance towards a true metaverse. That if we can't feed back into real life society, real life human condition, that this all becomes very sort of pointless, doesn't it? I wanted to point to also before we the time's gone by so quickly. We have about 10 more minutes. We love your comments in the chat. Yes, this will be recorded again, and we'll share it out to YouTube and LinkedIn. So you'll be able to hear it again for those that missed the beginning. But in the beginning, we did touch on the idea of the vault and the idea of the NFT as a security. And I wanted to close with something that Philip Runyon wrote in this ongoing discussion about what is an NFT, what is a security, what is a derivative, which is the topic of our conversation tonight, and get both of your input on what he wrote. And Philip, he doesn't come to this discussion with no education in terms of a commonly accepted lexicon. He has the framework and the language, and he knows he deals in blockchain and NFTs and gaming, as well as growth hacking and startup incubation. So he's a professional in the sphere, and he says, "Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, or if I'm misunderstanding something. But aren't derivatives just contracts predicated on the price of an underlying asset at some point in time in the future?" And he's correct. That is what a derivative is. So he says, how would an NFT eBay be the same? If the house takes a percent for facilitating the sale, is that not a far cry from a derivatives market? So what he's saying there is, if you are partaking in a financial instrument which has the potential of being predicated on the price, the upgrade of the value of a price of an asset, then how is that different or the same from what we're doing with the NFTs? And what do you think of that idea?
Richard?
Yeah, let me have a first stab at that one then. Thank you. um, well, first thing I want to go on and look at is what are we defining as an asset to be traded and securitized? Because we've all bought a house in the hope that the value of that property goes up, and when we're ready to relocate, that we can resell it at a higher price to a new person at a profit and move on. Okay? But because the time scale is longer, we don't really see the price scale change, but we've bought a physical asset, we've waited for the asset's value to increase, and we've sold it at the far end. Is that a security? Is that a derivative? Plus, we've also all pulled a second mortgage before.
But that is but there are two kind of buyers. The one buys it because they want to have a house and they want to live there and they will never want to sell it. What you talk about is more like the 2008 or 7 subprime crisis, and that was actually triggered by derivatives because they put the mortgages into a financial product and they sold it with then the hope of making money, and they made a lot of money, but they took it from the wrong people.
And now they've made that illegal. So
yeah,
so that's what I'm saying. If we're going to be comparing it to that, and we've seen the complexity of what happens when people put derivatives on houses,
but it was not people, it was the banks that did that and the insurance companies. And we come back maybe one thing with what Susan said, that she ran into a situation where they're trying to earn money with doing art. Here is actually what is a very practical, very clear example of what happens if we don't have logic regulations, because then people say, oh, they have these weird things that an artist is not able to sell his art because it should be regulated and they maybe need a license, which is completely nonsense. But let's say if it becomes speculative, I would say there are some parts of derivatives like CFDs, contract for difference, where you do not need to buy the the underlying asset, and you only speculate on not only on going up, but also if it's going down, you can make your money, which is even worse. This is the worst kind of speculation. That actually then you have the short squeeze things that we had with
AMC.
GME.
exactly. And so if it's going into this direction, yes, we need regulations, definitely. But if it comes to the simplest part of it, people having an asset, art, or they want to sell their house, and there's a platform that facilitates this, and they can sell it, and they can make money out of that, great. This doesn't need to be regulated. The only thing that needs to be there is how it should be taxed, how the platform should be taxed, and should it be a anonymous transaction or not? These are the three questions, but not if this should be if this is a security and what kind of asset class it is, and this is where we have to go. We have to look at it in a logic way, and we have to look at it in a separate way, and not like putting it all under one umbrella. And because we have this vacuum, we say like, okay, now we have to regulate everything because blockchain is bad or it's criminal or blah blah blah. All these things so mixed up. I think we need to first structure it up and then say, okay, here it makes sense and here it doesn't make sense, and here it isn't a financial instrument. This is really an asset class that needs to be regulated or not, because we have also asset classes that don't need to be regulated, and that's it. I think this is the way to look at it, and there are much more professional people than I am that can are in financial sector that could maybe help with it.
I have a question to continue that with, Matthias, please. So knowing the kind of strategies that are very different, as you said before, of what's happening in the US, what's happening in Europe, and what's happening in China. Now, obviously, there's going to have to be someone that kind of leads the way into this regulatory form. Which of those three systems do you think is the most likely to be able to come up with a plan that is actually most viable?
The most likely is Chinese way, because they banned completely crypto. They have their own digital yuan, their own central bank issued digital currency. Everything else is forbidden, and they understood that NFTs and the Metaverse is something very interesting. So they accept NFTs, but you cannot pay or purchase these NFTs with a cryptocurrency. You can only purchase it with a digital yuan. So with a central bank issued or government issued digital currency. And with this, they regulated everything. With this, they only give way to, for example, I'm working on a project for music, for musicians, with some guys from the US and Chinese. They are actually in the Metaverse world. And there will not be a speculative factor on the NFTs. These are the rules that the Chinese are implementing, and these guys are really great minds. They found exactly the value and the way, not around, but to match with these regulations and to create NFTs where you really have to want to have it because you want to participate and help the artist. And the more you help, the NFTs goes up, and not because somebody is flipping it and buys it for 50 and sells it for 2,000, as we has it now with, I don't know, was it one rapper, which are not the fans. They don't even get it. So here is some regulation that is cool, for my opinion. Of course, we have the monitoring, we have the humanitarian issues and all this stuff with China, but they put something that works. Europe will not accept this for sure because they want to be more liberal, and the US. I think the US is losing it in the moment a little bit because they talk too much. And okay, this and this, and we have to do this. They don't come and it doesn't lead anywhere.
We're asked on our tax forms, our annual tax forms, right underneath the line about whether or not we want to give $1 to the president's election campaign. we're asked, just outrageous,
Sorry.
outrageous. We're asked, did you purchase crypto in the last tax year? Now they don't have
Or
any idea. They don't have any idea what to do with that information. Maybe they
So
do.
was it a
Maybe they're
tick
trying
box? So
to.
like, yes, I bought
It's,
crypto.
it's a
Tick,
tick
yes,
box.
thank you.
Yes, I bought crypto. You know,
does,
the thing is,
does
the
the
thing
Biden
is,
administration accept crypto donations?
no, not yet.
Can you,
No,
can you
but we do have officials who are getting paid via crypto. They're either transferring their check into crypto, or they've said that they would accept Bitcoin as payment, such as we have a mayor in the city of Miami, and then the
in New
mayor of
York?
the city of New York City said that they would both accept crypto as payment for their salary. Listen, we're at 7 o'clock. We could go on, but how we got from sneakers to taxes to vaults to derivatives to securities, it is a mind bending journey. And I just want to credit you, Matthias, that as you were tolerating this back and forth on this discussion on LinkedIn, you were very instrumental in getting really unknowingly too, even it was an innocent thing on your part to get this conversation really steamrolled and just way out of the boundaries of reality and common sense. So I just want to thank you for being clear and being precise and knowing of what you speak. I think that's a very important element of what you're talking about. And we would like to, look at maybe in a couple months from now having you back. You can share more about what's happening on the European sector, what's happening within the Blockchain Association, what's happening in your own ventures. We'd love to hear more about that. Richard, was there anything you wanted to close with tonight?
Just thank you to Matthias again, from my side as well. Having someone who's doing the good that you're doing and actually fighting the fights in the upper level in Europe to try and get these things both seen and understood is something that is so vital to the community. So thank you for not just being here, but for what you're doing on that side for the community in general. It's absolutely fantastic to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And especially for your graciousness in getting up so early in the morning. Hopefully, you can go back to bed and get a little bit of rest.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.